Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Learning Curve with me, Kenny. Today, I have a very special guest. With me today is Diego Fiche, Global Learning and Development Lead from, you got it, Sweden. Now, what do you normally relate to Sweden? Yes, that is also true. IKEA is something that you relate to Sweden. So, Diego happens to be working there, but he's going to use his combined body of knowledge today to take us through a really exciting topic, which, if I didn't mention already, is exploring storytelling in L&D. Hello, Diego.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for the nice introduction.
Thank you for being on. So give us a little background story. How did you get from wherever to
Brazil.
Sweden? I mean, of all things. I mean, your name doesn't really, you know, ring Swedish for me. So,
No, I don't even know the story of my name, but I'm originally from Brazil.
okay.
I've been living in many different countries, working for different global brands. I've lived in the US. I've lived in yes, in Brazil, obviously, in Germany for a very long time, working
Oh, so you can speak
for
German.
yeah, I can speak some German. Yeah.
Oh, had I known that, I would have spoken in German to you earlier. But okay.
Yeah, my German is yeah, I'm unlearning my German a little bit so that I can learn Swedish.
Okay. It sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
Swedish, I would say, is not one of the easiest languages, although I would put German was being complicated too. So I don't know. Where would you put it?
German is quite complicated.
Swedish easier?
I think so. Maybe because I already know German. So yeah, that makes it a bit easier
Mhm.
because a lot of words are kind of similar. Yeah, but I would say German is more difficult, or at least my learning curve was yeah, bigger there.
Oh, thanks for bringing up the name of the podcast there. Good plot. Okay, so David, like I said, today we're going to be talking about exploring storytelling within an L&D learning and development context. So
Yeah.
we're going to be hitting basically five points that we want to explore, and hopefully I'll have some suitable questions for you on that. We're going to be talking about exploring storytelling in L&D. Then we're going to move over to the intersection of storytelling and leadership. Then we're going to measure the impact of that. Developing storytelling storytelling skills is the fourth point. And then the fifth point we want to hit on today is the future trends in storytelling and L&D. So that being said, maybe for those people that aren't that familiar with storytelling, can you give us like a general explanation of what storytelling is?
Yeah, sure. To me, storytelling, it's like yeah. I mean, we are very we are very connected as humans in many different ways. So, and I think the storytelling is the element that actually makes it human.
Okay.
So we are all wired by stories. They are told in many different ways from the very past generations, like cavemen used to gather around and tell their stories like to the youth generations and pass on their learnings like to the youth generations. So I myself can really remember a lot of the stories that my mom used to tell me when I'm very young, and that captivated me so much. And a lot of those stories I can still tell them to my kids. So I think it's kind of the heart of the connection, if I would kind of put it in a simple way.
Okay. Okay. So maybe um, the first thing that came to mind when I was looking through it is kind of like, um, I guess, if you want to go back, it's part of our like history in the sense
Yeah,
because store before there was written language, people had to somehow communicate their learnings differently. So
yeah,
that's where I would, and from the way you explained it, I would see that's the origin of storytelling.
yeah,
So Um, what, however, makes storytelling such a powerful tool in the context of learning and development?
Mm. I think it's the emotional connection that it creates. So when a story is really well told,
Mhm.
you can really get yourself and experience yourself being there. And I think it activates all our senses, our sight, our hearing, our feelings, and that really makes us like almost live that experience. And I think that makes it really impactful, like for you to put yourself like in that character and learn from it.
Okay. Now, storytelling is just one method or one tool, right? I mean,
Mm.
you're you know you're a lead in this, and you've developed all kinds of learnings and so forth, and approaches and so forth. Um, how does storytelling compare to some other methods of delivering training or leadership content?
Mm. Yeah, I have a little example. So imagine you're going you're going in to join a training.
Mhm.
And the first thing that the speaker says is like, okay, now we're going to talk about the 7 different principles of leadership. Uh, I think a lot of people would already start to wander around with their minds. But if the speaker comes and talks about, I remember that time when I was a new leader and I stepped into that room to meet my new team. My legs were shaking. I had this like really cramping in my stomach, and I a lot of thoughts going through my mind as I walked in. I met them, and yeah, this and this happened. So you kind of like get yourself into that story, and you can relate a lot better. So the emotional connection makes you remember more than you're just like talking about dry facts or steps or different methods and tools. So I think that's where storytelling adds that element of strength because it creates a connection. And yeah.
Okay. I had there was just man, I just lost my train of thought when you're answering that. I had a similar um, idea or thought when talking about how a story affects you. So, mm, well, let me see if I can come up with a train of thought later again. But let me continue with my direction of questioning.
Yeah.
Why do stories resonate so deeply? I think you already answered it with learners on an emotional cognitive level. I think you just answered it, but just take me through it one more time, just so it'll give me a chance to also think about what I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, our brains are kind of lazy. We're looking into ways to process information
Hmm.
in the way that it's the most effective. And stories are very easy to kind of process the information and then make it relatable and more engaging because a lot of us have either gone through a story or we can imagine that that experience has happened or we can kind of build the empathy towards the speaker, so there's more trust, there's more connection, and I think that's easier to remember than just dry facts and or yeah, PowerPoint slides or different things.
And I would have to agree, because I remember um, there were times when I don't remember this example, but it's now basically a story that I'm telling. But um, when there was I remember reading something or hearing about something, when you have these people that, have what appears to us or me as a normal human being to be like this incredible memory, or this incredible, they can see, a series of pictures, or a series of numbers, images, whatever, and they can memorize, up to like 455 characters.
Mm.
And I remember that one of the individuals said, how do you remember all this information, just from glancing or whatever?
Mm.
And he then said, he or she said, I make a story about it.
Yep.
So they start with, A is for Apple and da 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 da, and then they mentally make a story, and by that they map it out and memorize all the images or things that related. So
Yeah,
that's where I can actually really relate to what you just said, and it makes
yeah.
so much sense to me. Um, let's take another stab at this. Can you share some examples of how storytelling has transformed a learning program or something that you've participated in?
Mm. Yeah, I remember a project that I was working on that we were developing an e-learning, and that e-learning was a kind of a technical topic.
Oh, so
Uh,
dry, what we would say.
yeah, or complex. It was a complex and somewhat technical. There were methods, like different methods and tools, different things that required a little bit more of, yeah, explanation. And we kind of turned that around and look at, okay, what are the challenges that employees are facing? Like, what is the purpose that we want to get with this solution? What are the challenges that actually the learners are having in applying those skills? So I think, what we did back then was to actually collect the story from a manager who has been going through that those methods, have been using those methods and tools,
Hmm.
have been facing a lot of challenges, and how it helped her to actually, yeah, transform and learn something new. So through that story, I think that was a lot easier for learners to resonate. They build an emotional connection with the speaker. They could put themselves in that situation, and therefore it was a lot easier for them to actually learn what they were there to learn and take action. Because just the learning part, yeah, to observe the story, yeah, it's one part, and then the other part is actually, yeah, like, how am I going to go and apply that? So I think the story also helps to bridge that gap, like, to make that gap a little bit easier or shorter,
Hmm.
to kind of, yeah, from the learning to the action.
But are there also challenges to applying storytelling? What a classic example I might be thinking of um, is always when we talk about cultural differences, or sometimes even language differences and
Mm,
so forth. And I can imagine that, especially when applying storytelling, that it could be really difficult if you tell a story but in the wrong cultural context.
mm, yeah.
Example, I mean, I'll just fish one. What I'm thinking of is, like, we always say that the Germans are very, oriented according to time, and very punctual, very accurate,
Mhm,
and so forth and so on. Whereas we say, Southerners, such as, Spain, Italy, and so forth, are very um, not so, they don't, punctuality is not as big of a deal.
yeah.
So
Mm,
how does that figure out when you're working out a story? How does it, do you
mm,
take that into consideration? Is that something that you actively have to look at, or something that
mhm.
that just flows into it?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a very good question.
Hmm.
First of all, and yes, I mean, you need to understand who is going to learn, right? You need to understand your audience, who is going to consume that learning, so that
Hmm.
you can build the story in a way that it relates as much as possible to the one listening to it. And I think a lot of those challenges, yeah, with culture perspectives, when you're talking about, yeah, and an organization also has its culture. Then you have the different cultures, like, as you mentioned, like different countries,
Hmm.
and then different ways of working. So I think one thing that I believe storytelling can do is actually remove kind of those biases, because you're having a character that is going through challenges and making that character very human. Like, they're talking about their own challenges.
Okay.
So that way, like, you can still relate to those, to the different challenges that the character is facing, even though you're maybe in different contexts, I would say.
Okay.
Mm,
Okay. Okay. So,
mm,
so I noticed that you're drawing on a pretty good toolkit here to create a story. So, I mean,
mm,
um, because in the example, I only, since I'm not a developer, I noticed that when I made my example, I had a limited tool way of going about it. But I
mm,
think what was really interesting is your approach started with, understanding the learner, and
mm.
then at that point it became very neutral. So the cultural context that I had, pounded onto it there earlier was removed with a couple simple methods, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
Mm,
Um, Talking about the engagement of the audience. So,
mm,
what role does interactivity play in making story even more impactful?
mm. It's a great question. I think the interactivity part makes you actually go even more into the experience. So if you think about, yeah, if you're watching a movie, and you would have like a character facing a dilemma, and that character, and then you would have two choices. Like, okay, I choose that he or she decides this, or that, and then it draws you to a different, like, different scenarios. So I think, like, that's one way of using interactivity to kind of put yourself into the experience, to feel the feelings that are actually going on in that story. uh, and uh, and as you are there in that story, I think it's much easier to kind of imagine yourself being in that situation, uh, and doing that. Yeah,
Okay.
whatever needs to be done, right? Whatever needs to be acted on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that an integral part? Do you think, is it just another um, part of the storytelling to create interactivity, or would you say it's like an integral part? Like if I
Mm,
were to set up, like what would be my toolbox of, making a storytelling um, uh, um, uh, e-learning, for example,
you learn.
based on that. Would that be is that one of the tool? Is that a key element, or is it more variable than that?
Mhm. I would say it's variable depending on, yeah, on the learner needs, and also their reality.
Okay.
It does create more engagement because you actually get yourself more into the story if you're able to put yourself in there. That's why video games are so addictive, because you're there, like, playing in the story, and like you can choose different things. You have the power. You're in control of what the character is kind of doing. So I think there has been a lot of growing trends on gamification as well with learning, and there is enough research of, like, how it creates better engagement.
Mhm.
I I think it's still like a kind of element that can add to it,
Mhm.
because if a story is well told,
Mhm.
and it has very, like, a lot of details, and it can really make you picture yourself
Mhm.
in that situation, of that what that person is feeling, sensing, and I think that creates already the, like, a really good impact. The I think the what you mentioned with the interactivity, to me, it's like it is an add-on to more like the engagement part, I would say.
Mhm. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, it, then take me through looking and researching. I came across the word uh, learner persona.
Mhm.
Where does that when you were the last question I asked, when you were explaining it a little bit, um, and you were saying that, you know, the integral part of interactivity, that the person, puts themselves into that role. Where does the term learner persona fall in that? Can you
Mm,
explain that a little bit?
yeah, I mean, I think you really need to understand your audience,
Mhm.
like whoever is taking a learning solution. So I think that's where the learner persona comes in, to really understand if you're developing like a learning um, for new leaders, and you use language or methods and tools that are already for someone that has been in leadership for a very long time. What they will learn is much less than what the other person will do. So I think really understanding the needs, the barriers that the learner has, what's like who or what is in their way. I think that really helps to resonate and create a learning that is really more targeted. Um, yeah, there is not one size fits all, I would say. Even though there are learnings that you can take from different situations and different contexts, I think the more you know who is actually consuming that,
Mhm.
yeah, the content or that story, then I think the best you'll be able to craft the stories to actually resonate with the user, and yeah, the learning will be much more
Okay.
stick.
So the learner persona is then, by definition, or the way you've explained it, basically identifying that group of individuals that you will be training and their needs and their direction, and as closely matching their needs with what you want to teach them. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay. I think for the start, I think we're off to a good start, and I think we've explored the topic a little bit and gotten a little bit of understanding. So let's dive a little bit more into this topic by uh, in our next section, which is then the intersection of storytelling and leadership. And here, um, you're looking at a lot of trainings are also very much oriented towards leadership training. So,
Mm,
are there specific types of stories leaders should tell to inspire and guide their teams?
mm, yeah. Uh, I think I think one of the key ones is to be authentic and to share your personal stories, because personal stories create connection, they create trust,
Hmm.
and it makes it the threshold uh, less. What I want to say is that it makes us more human.
Okay.
Sometimes I think leaders can be glorified because they're in a position, like in
Mhm.
a higher position. They are uh, people tend to see leaders as like, okay, these invincible people, and I think sharing those personal stories, like, yeah, I messed this up. I actually failed. I failed at this.
Yeah.
I think that makes people resonate and really yeah, connect with a person, because we all have done that before. I think from a leader's perspective, also to share, okay, that's my vision, that's my purpose, that's our team's purpose. I think that also helps to for people to actually get inspired and guided in a similar direction. Um, and I think one other type of story that could resonate for leader is like how their leadership or the team work have actually inspired a customer, or have changed, transformed somebody's life as well, not only their own. Because I think what I mentioned with the personal is like, okay, I've I've had a conflict, or I've had a challenge. I've hit the bottom line, and now I'm transforming. And yeah, I learned something from that experience, that transform the way that I see things.
Okay.
uh, and I think the customer impacting story is like also like how we can actually impacted the story. I have an example of something that I read. If we have time for that,
Sure,
I
sure, 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 sure.
uh, it
The only
wasn't.
thing that the only thing before you start with the with that part, I noticed. So it's interesting at this point because I was looking at it at the whole storytelling um, in the first part so far has been pretty much confined to um, how do I develop a training and so forth and so on. But now we've moved a little bit with the last question towards the individual and communication. So it's not only something that you can apply when creating a training, but
Yeah,
rather also as a form of communication and how to get a more engaging conversation or exchange of ideas. So fascinating. Okay. So
yeah.
sorry, little interruption there, but go ahead then with your topic, um, please.
Great observation. Great observation. Uh, yeah, there's something I read. I don't remember the company. I don't
Mhm.
remember
Doesn't
like
matter.
the details very much, but that story really stuck with me because I think it really resonated.
Mhm.
It was a CEO who was going for a business trip, and he wanted to hire a car, like to rent a car. When he got there, his driver's license, they noticed that his driver's license was expired only a couple of days.
Mhm.
Uh, so he tried different things, and at the end, the he had a lot of meetings booked and things like that. At the end, the one of the employees actually decided to drive him around to the different places that he had to be, so that he would make it in his meetings, in his very important meetings. So then the CEO sends a message to the CEO of the rental car company and thanking them and like talking about the customer service experience that he had. And that was like that changed the whole culture of the company, uh,
Wow. Okay.
because like they immediately yeah, focus like a lot more on this different experiences. They and the CEO, every time that he was talking, the CEO of the rental car company, every time he was sharing that story, and that story was very inspiring and very like it could really resonate. Imagine being like traveling miles and going somewhere, and you're like, okay, I'm stuck here, I have nothing. So that's a clear example of customer like stories, or like or an example of, yeah, going the extra mile.
Okay.
If that's the culture that you want the organization to be sharing those stories, that would really drive more people to actually act in that certain way.
Okay. Well, see, you already the reason I'm giggling because I think the story is fascinating, and the in addition, you've already moved basically with the conversation to the next topic was measuring the impact. So one of the questions, like that I had was how can organizations measure the success of their story of their storytelling efforts in their L&D, but
Yeah.
you've already described a story and how that impacted an organization. So
Yeah.
already there we have an example of that. Um, let's move on to a different thing though. Or let me add one more. Do you have one more example maybe of how organizations can measure the success of
Mm.
storytelling in their L&D efforts? One specific, because this is already wrapped in a kind of a
Yes.
story, but do you have
Yes.
one like specific example that you can think of?
Uh, I think measuring part of stories is always a tricky one because
Mhm.
it's not as easy to measure
Well,
as
let's
ordinary.
confine it to maybe let's put it in an area that is measurable. Let's say
Mm.
um, if you were to design a training,
Mm.
there you would have some type of measurability, right? Wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I think you could. What you could do is compare, like deliver a training without the stories, only with the information that is needed for learners to deliver a training which has the stories, and you can do that in a testing scenario, for example. Like maybe you don't need to do a full blown, but like when developing, you could also test those two and see which one resonates more.
Right.
And
Well,
I'm
in the
sure it
course
would be
of
the
the
one with
training,
the
have you
story.
in the course of your career, have you had that situation where you come into a place and classic cases, you get somewhere and you're going like, oh my God, what are they doing for training tools here, right? So then you're like, okay, let's bring in an element of storytelling, and
Mm.
then you see that the engagement goes up. Have you experienced that or something
Yeah,
similar?
yeah, I think it was that example that I gave you earlier of the technical training.
Okay.
And the story really drove engagement, and I think people started to talk about it, and like, oh yeah, that training, it's yeah, it's really fun and really engaging, and there is a story that I can learn something from it. So I think yes, the story is, I think it really brings the the essence of the learning. It's not the only method, but it's I think it's one of the ones that actually help to connect.
Okay. Um, I, the next question I have, I'm not sure if it's placed correctly because we said measuring impact. But one of the other questions I have, like technology integration. How do you see this might be the question also related later in the end, future outlook. Do you want to say that question for a future outlook? Because the question basically is, in essence, is what role does technology play in enhancing storytelling in L&D? Is
Yeah.
that something that you think would be answered better in this frame, or is that an outlook
I
for you?
think it's a bit of both.
Okay, and let's take
Yeah,
let's take it up here. Maybe we'll also include it at the end. Go ahead.
because I think there is already like a lot of technology that helps to enhance. For example, VR.
Hmm.
If you're talking about the leadership training, and conflict is a typical thing that happens within like leadership. You will face conflict at one point of time, and we handle those situations different. And VR can simulate those real world experiences and put yourself there, so you're actually connected with all your senses. Uh, I've had a friend developing like this very thing that few years back, and we were testing it, uh, and he put me like in these VR glasses,
Hmm.
and going on the in a meeting, and then like the employee, the team like suddenly say something, and then the other one screams, and the other one like closes their arm, and it was so real. Like I could feel it in my body, that situation, and like really put myself in there. So so that can really help to prepare yourself to be in many different situations.
Okay.
So that VR is one, and I think now, maybe now and to the future, it's like the AI part to make it more personalized, like different stories, and like based on learner input, so you can have like also different learning paths based on different stories that actually relate to you and that resonates to you much better. So I think it's huge. I think the role of technology, so that you can also make it scalable.
Okay. Okay. So that's okay. So you have one answer less for the end of the end of the podcast. Okay. We had the next thing that we're going to look at was developing storytelling skills. Now,
Mm.
um, you've already answered that question a little bit to the in the various contexts that you've already stated, especially the story that you had. But are there any specific things that you can say for how can L&D professionals or trainers develop their storytelling
Mm.
skills? Is there
Yeah,
something that you can recommend, even if it's a
yeah,
book or something, or
yeah.
um,
Yeah, there are two books that I have. Yeah, I think they're super good. One is like the Storytelling Animal, and I'm really bad at names, so please, just look it up. You will find it.
the
The
storytelling animal?
Storytelling
Okay.
Animal. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think it really yeah, it shows like from the back and from the history and how we are wired through stories and like how to use it. And like specific for leadership, there is one that is called Lead with a Story.
Leads with a story.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can get the name of the of
I think we can find it. It'll be
yeah,
easy to find on the big, you know,
yeah,
place that everybody goes and finds stuff.
exactly, exactly.
Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
there's different places where you can find it. But I think I usually like for my own development, and then also when developing like learning solutions, like the experiences,
Mhm.
I usually tend to a model of actually how we learn as adults. We learn most through social interaction and experiences.
Mhm.
So social interactions would be sharing stories, right? You hear a story of someone, or you share your own story. I think that helps you also like you learning from different people, but you also sharing your own. You also reflecting uh, and the other part is the experience part to actually go and do it, like
Mhm.
to really start to craft. So the part with the books and the TED talks uh, and uh, and so I think it's one part to actually get inspired,
Mhm.
to learn the knowledge. But I think the bigger part, which is like 90% of actually how we learn, is like the social interaction and the experience. So learning from other stories and then applying them into your real life and your context.
Okay.
Without that, yeah, it stays only here, and that's not really effective. I remember one more that I one guy that I really like. His name is Vin Jiang, and he's a master communicator,
Mhm.
and but he's also a very good storyteller. And he makes it very fun, easygoing, and like yeah, he has his own course of communication and different things.
You'd have to
Uh,
repeat that name because I didn't quite get that. What was that?
Vin, Vin,
Vin? Like Vin
yeah,
Diesel?
like it's VIGH
Okay.
and like
VIGH. Okay.
and something like this, and Jiang,
John. Okay.
G.
G. Ah, see, the German came out on you. Okay, interesting. There you go. We caught you. Okay, cool. So, do you have a title for one of his books that probably would make these
I
your?
don't think he has. I'm not sure he has a book.
Oh,
He has a online course and master classes and
okay,
TED talks, and yeah,
okay, okay.
he's yeah, on
And
social
his
media.
and that is solely around storytelling or
His focus is on communication,
communication
like
as
yeah.
such. Okay.
But if you search for storytelling, his
Mhm.
name on storytelling, you'll find also a lot of good things that you can use, like how to craft a story. And then he also interviews people where they start to tell a story, and then he gives like little nuggets, like, okay, what about this? Tell me about the details. Impersonate the the characters, like what's happening in the situation. And I think it makes it so yeah, it's very light and
Okay.
easy to get it. And then he also has some practical
Practical.
uh,
Mhm.
yeah, tips or actionable things that you can yeah, apply on your day to day. So I think that makes it like the one step further.
Okay, so that's on. So you have basically two sides of the medallion. One is you've given us two books that you can recommend, and a communication specialist, which will give you the fundamentals of storytelling. But aside from that, your biggest point would be practical knowledge is good, but the actual application
Yeah,
is the part that gets you the most. So not only do you
yeah,
have to learn it, but you have to apply it. Okay, that I think
exactly.
is general, applies describe almost everything. But the interesting thing is, storytelling reminds me so much of. I had an interview with an individual about the topic of gamification,
Mm,
and um, it also, in his discussion, um, as storytelling kind of takes us back to our ancestral roots, so to say,
mm,
before we had written language. That was a form of communication and learning. So too was gamification, is an early childhood um, topic. That's how we, before we can communicate orally,
mm,
we learn through games and so forth. And that
yeah,
same idea of learning is then applied to adults because it's something that that, is, uh, saying it's programmed in your DNA is a little ridiculous, but
yeah,
basically it's at an early stage, you have this form of learning,
yeah,
and that can still be applied because it's a pattern that you've already applied, used, and are familiar with, and that
yeah,
can be reintroduced at an adult age to allow you to once again learn things. So also is storytelling something
yeah,
that, I would say we had in our ancestral past, but that we now again have identified and use it today in the
mm,
various formats. Okay,
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. It's I just to add to that. I mean,
Mhm.
it is hardwired, like in our brain, and I mean, w- we are connected with our feelings. Like I
Mhm.
think that's yeah, that's the thing that makes us human. And when a story is well told, you will also release oxytocin, which makes us connect with all of those senses much more, and that that makes you almost be in that experience, and be living it. If you really watch a character, like someone in a movie struggling with something, and like, oh, like, yeah, with the resilience, like going and turning their life around,
Mhm.
you're like, wow, yeah, that actually makes it possible to do it. So I think it's both, like what you mentioned, like, okay, it's very deep in us how we have learned from childhood, but I think it's also from the neuroscience like perspective as well, how our brains are wired.
Okay. Okay.
Mm,
Um, then before we have one more topic that I'm going to hit on that I don't think I listed, and that was blending marketing and L&D, because there's
mhm,
also, of course, the need to communicate, I guess, the idea of storytelling. So
mm,
what storytelling strategies from marketing could be adopted to create more compelling learning journeys? That's a
mm,
completely off the wall question, but
yeah,
that's the question that I saved to completely get you off a base and um, get you into a completely different zone. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
you want me to repeat the question, or that,
yeah.
that one came out of left field? Okay, here. What storytelling strategies from marketing could be adopted
Mm,
to create more compelling learning journeys? Wow.
yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, wait. I have one more for you. I'll give you two options.
Yeah.
You can either answer that one or you can answer the second one, which is how can organizations build brand loyalty within their learning communities?
Mm, I think I'll go with the first one.
Okay.
We can also go through the second one after that if you feel like it didn't resonate. But I think one of the things that I learned from my time at Adidas and being a product manager
Mhm.
was, yeah, to really connect with the consumer. And then like I was creating products
Mhm.
that would reach consumers. And I think that from a marketing perspective, to understand like what's your product, and the product here in that sense, you can relate that what's the learning like element or the learning solution
Mhm.
that you have, and then what's the consumer that you're targeting to, and then like what's the learner. So I think
Okay.
those things, I view it like this, and I think I could transfer a lot of the learnings that I got from marketing to apply in with learning. And I think one of the things that I think also marketing does, and not always L&D does, is actually to make a campaign out of the learning solution.
Very
To,
true. So.
I mean, you have the intrinsic motivation, like you really want to learn something, but if you really want to drive change and you want like a massive amount of people to actually go and learn something, I think making a campaign and making it like, well, there is actually some rewards here. There's actually some motivation here.
Mhm.
Oh, why is he or she doing it and I'm not in? Like, so kind of creating those elements that makes us actually draw into things like that, bringing those market elements from, I think, from the campaign side to actually like inside the learning as well, to actually like have the mouth to mouth, like
Okay.
create something that is really talkable, I would say.
Okay. Well, for a question that was supposed to catch you off guard, I think you did an excellent job at answering it.
Thank
And in summary, I guess taking what you said, the parallels, I guess, in um, in storytelling and marketing, kind of at least when it comes to, I guess it's the structure or how you go about it. In
you.
both cases, you have to identify both your product and the learner, or in this case, the audience. So
Yeah,
for both of them, the audience is important as well as the product, and then you have to bring those two together. So that's
yeah.
really a rough, short version of what you said, but that's kind of what I got out of it.
Thank
Um, Okay, so then we're almost at the end of our podcast. So we're with our last point, and that would be future trends in storytelling and L&D. So
you.
how do you see storytelling evolving in the L&D space in the next 5 to 10 years?
Mhm. I think I think there is already like a big trend of this customizable journeys,
Uh-huh.
um, or individualized journeys, I would say.
Hmm.
So I I am an individual.
Hmm.
I have my own needs. I'm at different levels compared to you in many different ways, and I have my own learning needs and desires, and so I think the trend of being able to individualize my learning to my own needs at that time,
Hmm.
because also that's an element of learning is, okay, we actually learn when we actually need it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so learning in the moment of need to be able to have those elements, and I think with a big explosion of AI, there is already quite many things happening,
Hmm.
but I see a lot of those elements of the this I put it like this because I visualize a pyramid with
Hmm.
this 70-20-10, the way that we learn, like the
Hmm.
10% is formal trainings, the 20% is the social part, and then the 70% the experiential side. I think that will AI and the different technologies, like I think there will be a lot more um yeah present
Hmm.
into bringing those elements to life, like the experience side more real to me as Diego.
Okay.
This is actually what I want to learn right now. I'm dealing with a conflict here. I don't know how to deal with the situation. What should I do? Like you can ask those questions now. They come like in more generic form. I think as the trends emerge, I think they will be much more on point and really directed to you as an individual.
Okay, but okay, then I have to ask a critical question though at
Yeah.
that point, because right now my experience mostly with trainings and so forth is basically that somebody sits down and thinks about how this training is going to work. Now, um, you say 5 to 10 years with the help of AI. Um, you envision
Maybe earlier than that. I
uh,
would say.
well, you envision basically a training that is individualized, so customized to the individual and
Mm.
his need at that time. And I'm just wondering, is that then going to be, um, in the vision that I have right now? I think, what is it? Google is running this. Isn't Google out there with what's Google's AI called right now? Anyways, they're running this campaign where you're
Is it
basically
multiple,
talking to your Pixel
multiple
phone
learning?
in a regular voice. You're like, "Hey, how you doing?" Blah blah blah. And is like, "How do I repair this socket?" And the AI says, "You need a 6-inch wrench," whatever. Is that is that kind of like the feeling that I'm getting from this? I mean,
I think that's one element. Sorry.
what I'm specifically trying to ask is, will there be anybody out there actually then right now you have individuals like you identifying, you're going through identifying the person and the training, and then you're applying that in a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's your vision, thoughts, and so forth and so on. Is that then going to be completely handed over to an AI in
Yeah.
order to be able to, give this training right at that moment for that individual at that time? Or
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I'm not trying to make my job redundant.
right, yeah. Well, sorry,
So,
yeah, you're right. I actually, I just rationalized you out there. Okay.
yeah, no, I think we still bring the human element, right? So things that AI cannot do, like all the human skills that we learn, we actually with the social part and the interaction part. What I mentioned was more the personalization of the learning. Maybe I wasn't specific enough, but like I could personalize some of the things that I need at that time. I still need to go out there and apply it. I still need to go out there and do it, right? As business are run with people, and yeah, we are, yeah, we are as consumers, like we're also people. So I think that human element is something that we cannot forget. So maybe also, uh, as you mentioned, like the role of learning and development in 5-10 years, I would say it's probably really to understand the users,
Mhm.
to build like learnings that are connected with the learning goals. I mean, the goals of an organization, for example, they will also shift. So a learning professional will also need to kind of learn to adapt to those. And
Mhm.
so I think AI is more like I would say it's a support to build those personalized journeys. But we also see a lot of trends on micro learnings, which has been there for a while. But I think with the big impact of social media, now you also see stories. Like
Mhm.
it's Instagram stories, it's Facebook stories, LinkedIn stories. So it's people sharing their stories, the stories of their life or their learnings, and then
No,
people actually like
it's
getting those.
amazing how you tied that in. It just, after you said that, I just thought of it, and you're like, right, it's called stories now. It's like these stories, Instagram stories, this and so, and it's always been there. But I now when I'm talking to you and seeing it in the context of storytelling,
Mm.
it's like, wow, okay, are they just using a buzzword or what? Okay,
Yeah,
interesting. Okay,
yeah,
so Diego, then you've pretty much answered all my questions, and I think it was a very, very interesting discussion with you.
yeah.
So let's close our podcast with maybe um, one, or if there are between 1 and 3 takeaways that you would like to impart to our listeners um, in the idea of, well, let me not lean into the question too much, but storytelling is in general. What 3
Mhm.
things would you, if you were to say, uh, 3 essential parts, or 3 parts that you would like to have somebody remember about storytelling? Um, what would you give them for a story there?
Yeah, well, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Three only.
Well, I like 3. Somehow I was always told, see, this is one again, maybe it's a story or something that I heard, but
It's communication. Yeah.
Everything is, in threes.
Yeah.
One is not enough.
Yeah.
Four is too much. So in
Yeah.
threes seems to be like, you can only do one if you want.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
I would say that yeah, storytelling is a powerful tool to combine with other methods of learning can really deepen the experience and drive action, or like reduce the bridge between knowledge and action. I would
Awesome.
say that's one.
That was pretty good. You sure you want to go for another one?
No, let's keep the one. Otherwise, it's gonna be like 5 or 10. Yeah.
I think that one was really good because the other thing is our listeners also get to see the podcast if they choose. So there'll be a video to that. And I love the way you focus internally by closing your eyes and visualizing everything. So that puts a very perfect, I think, ending to our discussion here on exploring storytelling in L&D. Diego, thank you very much for finding the time to discuss the subject matter with me. I feel engaged and very much more enlightened on the topic than I was previously. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And any last words from you?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. Yeah. I was a little nervous at the beginning, but yeah, I mean, it's so much fun to be in this setting and to talk about a topic that is fascinating. So I'm quite excited about the opportunity. So thank you so much for that.
Okay, great. So thank you very much again for being on the podcast. And maybe we'll have to grab up this topic again. I'll recall or call you up again for another topic so we can see maybe in 3-4 years where the topic has taken us and how it's changed. And
Yeah.
we can take another look at it. So for all our listeners out there, thank you very much for listening to this episode of The Learning Curve. If you liked it, smash the like button, or even better, just hit the subscribe button and you'll be in the loop for all our future episodes. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
The Learning Curve with Kenny is presented to you by Share IMC, one of the leading providers of digital learning solutions. Make sure not to miss any of our seasonal content by subscribing in the podcast app of your choice.